Most of us have been told our entire lives to be kind, patient, and endlessly giving. We're taught that to be a good person, especially as we grow older, means we should always keep our hearts wide open to the needs of others. While generosity and warmth are beautiful qualities, there comes a point, particularly after 70, where the rules of engagement shift. You begin to realize that time is more precious than ever. Energy is a finite resource, and your emotional reserves can be stretched to the limit if you're not careful. Despite a lifetime of well-intentioned advice urging you to be compassionate at all costs, there is a quiet but urgent truth. If you don't learn to live a little more coldly, more detached, more selective, more guarded, you risk sacrificing your own peace, health, and happiness on the altar of unending availability. This might feel uncomfortable at first, because living coldly sounds harsh. It suggests a shutting down, a dismissal, or a refusal to let people in. But in reality, living a bit colder at 70 and beyond isn't about cruelty. It's about protecting the heart you've spent decades nurturing. It's about ensuring you're not drained by relationships, obligations, or crises that others place on your shoulders. It's about making decisions that honor your well-being. Because at this stage, your greatest gifts, your wisdom, your time, and your emotional presence must be allocated wisely. Otherwise, you can spend entire days, months, or even years catering to needs that never reciprocate or conflicts that never end. In the paragraphs that follow, we'll look at 6 compelling reasons why living more coldly is an act of healthy self-preservation rather than callousness. We'll delve into what it means to detach emotionally, say no without guilt, practice selective empathy, guard your time, protect your boundaries, and release yourself from outcomes you can't control. By the end, you'll see that this shift in perspective can redefine your golden years in ways that bring real fulfillment and genuine calm, not the appearance of peace, but the real thing. 1. Emotional detachment becomes a lifeline for inner peace. If there's one lesson that crystallizes after 70, it's that your inner peace becomes non-negotiable. At this age, life is both simpler and more complicated. Simpler because you may no longer have the intense day-to-day obligations of a career, and more complicated because physical changes, the health of loved ones, and shifting family dynamics can cause ongoing stress. It's easy to get pulled into dramas or conflicts that family members, neighbors, or old friends expect you to mediate. You might feel obligated to weigh in, fix, or facilitate every emotional crisis that arises. But here's the truth. The older you get, the more vital it is to draw a clear boundary around your emotional energy. Emotional detachment isn't about becoming apathetic or ceasing to care about people you love. It's about choosing where to place your care so that you're not constantly embroiled in chaos. This might look like not trying to fix every family argument, staying out of relatives' romantic entanglements, or letting go of old grudges that only steal your peace. The world around you can churn with disputes, heartbreaks, and tensions, but you can opt to watch from a safe distance rather than diving in. Think about Harriet, an 82-year-old woman who was once the go-to listener for every single niece, nephew, cousin, and friend. At first, she felt important. Everyone needed her. But as the years rolled on, Harriet realized she was losing sleep over problems that weren't hers, spending entire afternoons stressing about other people's finances or love lives, and devoting precious time to phone calls that left her drained. When she finally decided to practice emotional detachment, she discovered a remarkable truth. People learn to handle their own problems without relying on her to play savior. Detachment involves acknowledging that you can still offer compassion without offering up your inner calm. You can empathize without entangling your emotions in someone else's crisis. It's as if you build a flexible but impermeable shield around your heart. You can see and hear what's happening, but it doesn't soak into your spirit, hijacking your peace. Over time, you'll notice that the cravings for your constant emotional labor diminish. People might still knock on your door, but when you respond with calm neutrality, they often find different avenues to solve their issues, or they learn to handle them on their own. Another vital component of emotional detachment is learning to let go of worry about things you cannot change. After 70, You've seen enough of life to realize that some events and outcomes will unfold whether you fret about them or not. You might have adult children making questionable decisions or old friends who refuse to heed good advice. Rather than letting their choices consume you, you can detach from the desire to control how it all turns out. This stance frees you from endless rumination or late-night anxieties. Each day, you can focus more on what truly matters for your own well-being. A peaceful mind, a calm heart, and an environment that nurtures your health. People might call you cold for not immediately diving into every emotional tangle, but in reality, you're just protecting the serenity you've earned through decades of life experience. It's your prerogative to say, "I love you, but I won't immerse myself in your storm." Emotional detachment then becomes a lifeline, a direct route to maintaining the sense of calm that allows you to savor the time you have left, rather than squandering it on perpetual chaos. 2. Saying no without guilt. Safeguards your limited energy. A hallmark of maturity is finally realizing that no is a complete sentence. After 70, you gain a sharper sense of just how precious your remaining years are. The illusion that you have infinite time to do all the things others demand melts away, replaced by the clarity that each day is a gift. If you commit every single moment to tasks, favors, or demands that don't serve your well-being, you'll wind up exhausted, resentful, or both. Think of how many times in your younger years you might have said yes out of a sense of obligation. Perhaps you volunteered for extra duties at work, agreed to host gatherings when you were already overwhelmed, or loaned money you couldn't really spare, just to keep the peace. While some acts of generosity are soul-nourishing, others drain you to the point of depletion. As you cross 70, you realize it's unsustainable to keep saying yes without considering the toll it takes. Picture Dorothy, a 77-year-old with 6 grandchildren. Whenever any family member needed childcare, Dorothy used to drop everything, even if it meant postponing her own medical appointments or skipping social activities that brought her joy. Over the years, her health deteriorated, and she resented her family for not noticing her silent sacrifices. Yet Dorothy had never said no. She never allowed herself to protect her time. When she finally did, saying, "I'm sorry, but I can't babysit this weekend," something remarkable happened. The world didn't collapse. Her children figured out alternatives. They learned to respect that grandma's well-being matters too. Saying no without guilt is a skill that might feel alien if you've spent decades bending into others' needs. But it's also one of the most liberating changes you can make after 70. You don't have to offer lengthy explanations. You don't need to stall or pretend you're too busy. You can simply say, "I'm not available for that." The people who value you will accept it without resentment. The people who try to guilt trip you are likely those who benefited from your perpetual yes. Let them deal with their own reactions. Your job is to defend the time and energy that remain. This form of living coldly looks less like shutting people out and more like refusing to be drained by external demands. It means preserving the energy you do have for what truly nourishes your soul. Spending time with friends who reciprocate your kindness, engaging in creative hobbies, or simply enjoying the tranquility of a well-deserved rest. When you no longer feel chained by the fear of disappointing others, you discover an inner expansiveness. Life opens up. You discover that you can say yes to the things that truly align with your values and no to everything else. In that balance lies the sweet spot of energetic self-care that so many people in their later years crave but never allow themselves to pursue. 3. Practicing selective empathy protects your mental health. For many, empathy feels like a moral obligation. If someone else is suffering, we should do whatever we can to help carry their load. While empathy can certainly be a strength, it can also become a liability, especially if you apply it indiscriminately to every person and situation. After 70, you may feel empathy fatigue more acutely than ever before. This is because you've likely spent decades responding to crises, heartbreaks, or dramas in your circle. Eventually, the emotional investment can wear you down physically, mentally, and spiritually. Selective empathy isn't about turning off your compassion. It's about calibrating it so you don't drown in others' turmoil. You can still listen, offer kind words, and genuinely care when people face hardships. However, you set parameters. For instance, if a friend repeatedly calls you only to vent about the same issue, refusing every suggestion and ignoring all advice, you might limit how often you pick up or how long you stay on the phone. If a relative constantly spirals into drama, refusing therapy, ignoring solutions, or simply wanting a sponge for their endless grievances, you can compassionately suggest they seek professional help rather than leaning on you each time. Consider Ronald, who is 84 and used to be the emotional caretaker of his extended family. If a nephew struggled with addiction, Ronald would lose sleep over it. If a neighbor faced a messy divorce, Ronald felt compelled to mediate. Each crisis felt like it personally belonged to him. After a health scare caused by stress, Ronald realized he had to practice empathy within limits. He could offer advice or a listening ear, but not at the cost of his own health. He wouldn't stay on the phone till midnight absorbing secondhand trauma. He wouldn't chase down people who refused to improve their situations. In short, he learned to care without collapsing. When you implement selective empathy, you'll notice an immediate boost to your mental resilience. You sleep better, worry less, and feel more emotionally stable. You also begin to differentiate between people who genuinely need help and those who feed on attention or pity. This distinction is crucial. Authentic empathy involves meeting someone in their darkness, but not letting them drag you into a bottomless pit. By choosing when and how to engage emotionally, you preserve your mental health and ensure that your compassion remains a renewable resource rather than a bottomless drain. Others may accuse you of becoming colder, but in truth, you're embracing emotional wisdom, knowing that your reserves aren't infinite and must be rationed for what truly matters. 4. Guarding your time confirms your self-worth. Time is a peculiar resource. It often feels infinite when we're young, but as we age, we see how elusive and precious it really is. After 70, every day can feel like a priceless opportunity. Whether you want to read, travel, paint, learn a new skill, or simply enjoy the quiet rhythm of a morning cup of coffee, the hours matter. Yet so many older individuals continue to scatter those precious hours on obligations, visits, or errands that they don't actually find fulfilling. Guarding your time is not about becoming unreachable or selfish. It's about curating your life so that it aligns with your values, desires, and well-being. Society often applauds those who are constantly busy or always available, but never mistake a packed schedule for a fulfilling life. Overextension can mask emptiness just as much as it can demonstrate productivity. A colder approach means you no longer equate busyness with importance. Instead, you realize that time spent on your own mental and physical health is not wasted. It's crucial. Think about Eleanor, a 79-year-old who once believed she needed to attend every family function, community potluck, and church committee meeting. People praised her for her generosity and involvement, but Eleanor slowly recognized she felt more drained than uplifted by these gatherings. The chatter often revolved around gossip or repetitive complaints, leaving her tense rather than gratified. So she decided to scale back. She politely declined invitations she found unrewarding. She spent more days doing the activities she truly enjoyed: gardening, reading historical fiction, or having quiet chats with one or two dear friends. The result? Her sense of contentment soared, and her stress levels plummeted. In your later years, you might also discover that the hustle of large social gatherings loses its appeal. Rather than forcing yourself to attend every reunion, you can choose more intimate encounters where genuine connection flourishes. You might no longer be able to handle the noise, or perhaps you're simply tired of small talk. That's okay. By being selective, you affirm your self-worth, telling yourself and others that your time is a commodity to be treated with respect and intention. It is not a communal resource everyone can draw on at will. If someone criticizes you for pulling away, remember that you're not isolating yourself. You're recalibrating your life to focus on what truly matters. In many cases, you might inspire others to reflect on how they spend their own time. Seeing someone who has the courage to guard their hours rather than scattering them about can awaken a similar sense of respect in them. Ultimately, time guarding is a powerful statement of your worth. I have given and given for many years, but now, in this season, I choose my involvements carefully so that I can truly flourish. 5. Protecting personal boundaries. Shield your hard-earned freedom. Personal boundaries are like invisible fences that safeguard your well-being. They tell others, politely but firmly, how close they can get, how much of your energy and attention they can absorb, and what behaviors you will or will not tolerate. After 70, these boundaries become even more critical because your resources, time, health, energy, are not as abundant as they once were. Living more coldly is, in many ways, a synonym for living with consistent, respected boundaries. Imagine you've spent your life trying to keep the peace. You said yes to tasks that burden you. You tolerated remarks that hurt your feelings. You let your opinions be overshadowed by louder voices, believing it was kinder to stay silent. At a certain age, you realize that equating silence with kindness often leads to unresolved bitterness that poisons your final decades. This is where boundaries step in, and they do so without apology. When you decide that your living space is not a crash pad for relatives who fail to plan their own housing, you're not being cruel. You're respecting your home as your sanctuary. When you decide that you won't engage in phone calls where gossip or personal attacks run rampant, you're upholding the emotional quality of your day. And if you decide you're no longer hosting every single holiday, it's not because you've turned your back on tradition, but because you've accepted that your physical and emotional well-being outweigh the obligation. Some people, especially those who benefited from your lack of boundaries, may react with shock or even anger when you begin to enforce them. They might accuse you of having changed or of no longer caring. Recognize that these reactions often stem from losing the conveniences and emotional labor you once provided. Standing firm is the only way to let them know this is no temporary mood swing. This is your new standard. It's amazing how relationships adjust when you honor your boundaries consistently. Real friends or loving family members may be taken aback at first, but they'll learn to interact with you respectfully. Those who only sought to take advantage or soak up your emotional currency will fade away, opening more space in your life for relationships rooted in mutual respect. One dimension often overlooked is how your physical boundaries, too, deserve attention. Your body's needs might have changed. You may tire more easily, need more rest, or prefer a quieter environment. By living more coldly, you give yourself permission to listen to your body without apology. If that means skipping a late-night party or leaving a gathering early because your energy is flagging, so be it. You are at liberty to do what best supports your health. In doing so, you demonstrate self-respect, sending a clear message that your well-being is not secondary to social expectations. This is what protecting personal boundaries looks like in practice, an authentic caring for the self that was long overdue. 6. Detaching from outcomes brings true emotional liberation. Perhaps the most profound transformation you can experience after 70 is the shift from trying to control or influence every outcome to letting life unfold. The tension we carry often comes from the gap between what we want and the unpredictability of reality. Parents want children to choose certain paths. Grandparents wish grandchildren would uphold certain traditions. And friends hope one another will never stray too far from the values they share. While it's natural to hold these hopes, allowing them to dominate your emotional world can result in constant stress and disappointment. Detaching from outcomes is not a form of giving up. It's a practice of releasing your need for everything to conform to your blueprint. Living more coldly in this sense means you no longer ride the emotional roller coaster of whether situations go right or wrong. You offer your wisdom, your kindness, and your presence when appropriate, but you relinquish the illusion that you can single-handedly dictate results. Consider the story of Maria, a 75-year-old grandmother. She spent years worrying about her grandson, who seemed adrift. Uncertain career moves, questionable life choices, and minimal communication. She tried to intervene repeatedly, offering financial help, constant advice, even emotional pleas. Each time, her grandson either resisted, argued, or promised change but never followed through. Maria's days revolved around his problems, overshadowing her own well-being. When she finally embraced the concept of detachment, she found a quiet peace. She remained open and loving toward her grandson, but stopped micromanaging his decisions. In turn, she rediscovered interests she'd shelved for years: sewing, gardening, and volunteering. By letting go of her need to fix him, she felt emotionally liberated. And interestingly, her grandson eventually found his footing without her incessant oversight. This principle applies to smaller daily situations as well. You might stop trying to correct every misconception someone holds about you. If a neighbor gossips or a friend misunderstands your motives, you can calmly let it go, trusting that you don't have to prove your worth or battle their perspectives. You might also detach from the expectation that every family gathering must be perfect. If someone shows up in a bad mood or a long-standing sibling rivalry flares up, you can peacefully remove yourself from the tension, confident that you're not responsible for orchestrating universal harmony. When you detach from outcomes, a calm, steady sense of self emerges. Rather than bracing for disappointment or planning for every possible mishap, you reside in the present moment, dealing with what is rather than what if. This mental space can be life-changing. You breathe easier, sleep better, and approach each day not with dread, but with a measured optimism. You come to see that living a bit colder, less attached to controlling others' behavior or shaping the future, makes room for genuine joy to flourish. Instead of existing in a swirl of worry, you stand on solid ground, knowing you've done your best while letting life take its course. Reaching your 70s can be a deeply introspective time. You possess a wealth of experiences, some triumphant, some painful, and you bear the marks of decades spent giving, sacrificing, and striving. Society might whisper that being cold or detached is inherently negative. But as you've seen through these 6 reasons, emotional detachment, guilt-free no, selective empathy, guarding your time, strong personal boundaries, and releasing control of outcomes, living coldly is, in fact, a form of self-respect. It doesn't mean you become an uncaring hermit. Rather, you become discerning about who, what, and how you invest yourself. One of the greatest revelations is realizing that relationships or obligations that once felt life-giving can change over time. If you remain locked in old patterns, always the mediator, always the caretaker, always the yes person, you might end up bitter or used in your golden years. Embracing a cooler stance ensures that your heart remains alive, not battered by endless demands and manipulations. It liberates your mind to focus on passions or joys you've long postponed. You could take up painting, gardening, or traveling with the confidence that your life is no longer an open door for everyone else's emergencies. Another unexpected benefit is that the people who truly love and value you will rise to meet your boundaries. They'll respect your newfound clarity rather than pressuring you to revert to old patterns. You'll have fewer but more authentic relationships, those built on mutual respect rather than on what you can do for them. And for the energy vampires or drama magnets who fade away, it might sting initially, but you'll soon realize that your life is brighter without their perpetual draining presence. Don't be surprised if fear or guilt creeps in initially. These emotions often arise because society conditions us to equate self-care with selfishness. But reflect on all the kindness and patience you've already poured into the world. You've earned this chance to shield yourself from pointless stress. Living coldly is not about refusing kindness. It's about directing that kindness wisely. First toward yourself, then toward people and situations that genuinely deserve it. Finally, you might worry that becoming colder means missing out on deep connections or meaningful experiences. But ironically, the opposite often happens. By releasing what doesn't serve you, you make space for what does. You might discover new friendships with peers who also value their personal boundaries. You might deepen existing connections in a more honest way, where you don't have to pretend to be endlessly available or unflappably nurturing. That is genuine intimacy, built on truth and respect. So if you find yourself criticized for changing or not being the same, remember that evolution is a natural part of aging. You are pruning away what no longer brings light into your life so that you can flourish in the time you have left. That's not cruelty or bitterness, it's wisdom. The quiet revolution of living coldly after 70 doesn't close your heart. It saves your heart. It ensures that your remaining years are spent in the warmth of true peace, rather than the fires of unending, draining obligations. In that space, you can truly breathe, savor the small joys, and remain open to the wonders of life on your terms.